Welcome back to N.Rajini Kiranmai YouTube channel. This video helps you to understand the generations of computers. Let us look into the topic. When you're focusing on the generations of computers, we focus on the years. Like first generation, the people used first generation computers in the year 1946 to 1959, and second generation computers were used in the year 1959 to 1965. Third generation is from 1965 to 1970. Fourth generation 1970 to 1985. And the fifth generation was from 1985 to present. So according to the technologies that these computers have used and developed in different times, based on this concept, the computers are distinguished into 5 generations. Now let us look to these generations of computers in detail. Coming to the first generation computers, the technology used were the vacuum tubes or thermonic valve machine. So the best word that we can easily use is the technology that was used to generate or to create first generation computers were vacuum tubes. And the input of the system was based on punched cards and paper tapes, and the output was displayed on printouts. Punched cards in sense just like a OMR sheet where we mark the circles, and that sheet will be inputted into the system, and it is going to read these circles as an input. And the first generation computers use the binary coded concept, that is the languages which used zeros and ones. And the best examples that comes under the first generation computers were ENIAC, IDVAC. These are the two computers termed as a first generation computers. Let us move to the second generation computers. Before going to it, see the pictorial representation of first generation computers. So when you look at the first generation computers, literally occupied a room, complete room. And even we focus on advantages and disadvantages, as we are seeing that these vacuum tubes that we used in the first generations were not one or two, but thousands of such vacuum tubes were used, and that is the reason why the first generation computers were very bulky and was occupying a complete room. And obviously it generated a lot of heat, and because of generating a lot of heat, very often these computers were facing the breakdowns, and because of their frequent breakdowns, the computers were not very reliable. So projecting towards the advantages of the first generations were they were capable of making mathematical and logical operations, and of course coming to the disadvantages, they were too big in size, very slow in speed, low level of accuracy and reliability, breakdowns were quite frequent, and they were very costly both for purchase as well as maintenance purpose. Let us look to the second generation. As we said earlier, the period is from 1959 to 1965, and the technology used over here is transistors. So instead of vacuum tubes, the second generation systems started using transistors. So because of this usage, the size of these second generation computers were smaller when compared with the first generation computers, and in the same way, the computation time taken by these second generation computers were less when compared with the first generation computers. And when you look to the picture, it occupied one side of a room, like one wall of capacity was occupied by these second generation computers. And when we project towards the advantages, so to the right hand side, we presented what type of transistors, the pictorial representation of a transistor, which is a solid state device made up of semiconductor material called silicon. So because instead of vacuum tubes, the second generation computers started using these computational and uh, semiconductor transistors, and based on this device or technology, the second generation computers could able to perform all computational works as well as logical works. So let us see to the advantages and disadvantages. When you look to the advantage, the small space, as their size was very small. Instead of vacuum tubes, they started using transistors, and that is the reason why the size was small. And the fast computational speed was fast and less costly when compared with first generation. Less power and produced less heat when compared with the first generation. And they had a large storage capacity due to the use of magnetic care memories. And when you look at the disadvantages of second generation, uh, they were not adjustable to all situations, and they need air conditioning compartments to work to see that it doesn't go face any breakdowns, and they need a constant maintenance and lack in intelligence and decision making ability, and they handle the data in batch mode method or bench made only. So let us look to the third generation. The period is from 1965 to 1970, and the technology used in these computers were integrated circuits. So when compared with the second generation, third generation were size of the computers were very small, and in compared with the second generation, the computing time taken by the third generation computers were less, and the third generation computers consumed less power and generated less heat, and the maintenance cost of the computers were low when compared with the second generation. And these third generation computers was easier for commercial use. Let us look to the picture. So the third generation computers size has reduced to such a way that we can keep these third generation computers on a small table, and the integrated circuit is like a silicon chip with all buses and connections, control lines. So when you look at the advantage, size was very small and did not have a frequent breakdowns as it happened in the first and second generation computers. And when you look at the cost, cost was very less, and speed was 10,000 times faster than the first and second generation computers, and these computers could able to perform thematic operations, logical operations in nanoseconds. And they had a low cost storage devices called secondary storage devices like magnetic tapes, hard disks, which were located outside the machine. When you talk about the disadvantage, they created a lot of problems for the manufacturers at their initial states. And the second disadvantage is they could not provide any insight into their internal working. And the third were they were more costly, and the best examples that comes under this third generation computers were IBM 360 series and IBM 370 series, and of course the mainframe computers. Let us look to the fourth generation computers. The period was from 1970 to 1985, and the technology used here was large scale integrated circuits and also very large scale integrated circuits. And all the entire central processing unit was embedded in a single silicon chip. So the silicon chip is presented to the right hand side of the slide. When you look at the advantages of the fourth generation, very small in size, the computers were very small in size, and the cost of the operation is also very less. And these computers were very compact, faster, and reliable, as they were using a very large scale integrated circuits, and they are capable of facilitating the interactive online remote programming by a distance place can get these programs executed by centrally. And when you look to the disadvantages, are less powerful than mainframe computers. Let us look to the fifth generation computers, that is 1985 till today. These are the computers used in this period were termed as a fifth generation. and the major focus was to make the computer behave like a human, like work like a human using the intelligence and thinking power. And the technology used here were very, very large scale integrated circuits were used. And these machines were mainly designed to incorporate artificial intelligence to make expert judgment and decisions as a human being can do naturally. Advantages is very cheap and works at the fastest possible speed and has a highest possible storage capacity. And the major advantage is the system has a thinking power and decision making capability. When you look at the disadvantage, and these systems need very low level new languages, and they replace the human force and cause unemployment problem thereby. And because of these systems usage, the human brains became dull. So these are all the five generations of computers. Thank you for watching this video.